Next question. Martin in Doncaster. Martin, good evening.
Hello, Ali and panel. Yeah, the question is it a record to be proud of when over 3 million food parcels have been handed out on Richie Sunak's watch?
Okay, great. Thank you very much, indeed, Martin. So 3 million food parcels handed out on Rishi Sunak's watch. Record to be proud of, says Martin. Let me just give you a bit of background here. The charity, the Trussell Trust, which runs a network of food banks, says it handed out 3.1 million food parcels between April of last year and March of this year. It also said that demand for food parcels has almost doubled over the last 5 years. Siân.
Yeah, we've all seen the evidence of this in the brilliant work that the Trussell Trust does in counting up the number of food parcels that are put out, but also just in our local communities. I'm spending all my time now in Brighton, as you say, meeting different groups, helping in the community, and so many of those groups are helping people with essentially the cost of living, and it's people coming together and helping each other to purchase food cooperatively, to work with local businesses so that surplus food doesn't go to waste. These are fantastic projects. They're not even included in those figures. There are people all across the country just struggling to get by, and the Conservative government is absolutely 100% responsible for this. You could eliminate that kind of poverty just by increasing the amount that you give to people in welfare benefits, but also you can't punish children for the fact that their parents can't find work when we've had a pandemic, when we've had austerity stripping out the kinds of jobs people can do in local authorities, and we've had global pressures as well, and not to mention a massively chaotic fiscal event under one particular Prime Minister. These are all things that have harmed people's ability to live, that's harmed people's ability to get by on a day-to-day basis.
Do you think the Tories
they are responsible for this, and it could be ended. Nobody should be relying on
Do you think the Tories are being mean by actually trying to clamp down on benefits, which are going through the roof and are set to increase, by actually trying to get people who have got certain conditions back to work to do something that they can do rather than focus on what they can't?
I think in the situation that we are in, the announcements that were made a couple of weeks ago that they were going to once again crack down on supposed benefit fraud was the most tone-deaf thing I've ever heard. It's absolutely wrong. And from Silkie's point of view, the very idea that they're starting to wave around facial recognition to go and spy on people who might be working, the expense of doing that when you could just simply make sure that people have enough to live on.
Charlie.
Well, nobody wants to hear about the story of somebody going to, whether it's a food bank or going to seek, help from your community. But, there is a problem here, where the economy has taken a knock. If you take COVID, for example, there's been a £400 billion bill that needs to be paid. The cost of living, which is essentially the question of what you're asking, has to be addressed, and that's what the government's trying to do. Inflation is coming down. It has to grow the economy. The government will say that, there are more people in work than ever before. Unemployment is at its lowest.
4.5%.
4.5%, and it's legislated for a national living and minimum wage, which is always increasing. So it has done the kinds of things that you'd expect to do to help with the cost of living at a time when it came into an office where there was a little note that was left that said there is no money left. So I think, look, you've got to take things as you see it. It's just a harsh reality that there will always be people, I think, that will need additional help and support. It's right to help those people. But I don't think you can constantly do that when you've got a growing debt, when you've got higher taxes, and when the economy isn't growing. So I think the policies that the Conservatives have pursued and achieved are going to help in some way. But of course, you don't want to hear people relying on food parcels.
Silkie, 2.5 trillion of public debt, 400 billion of borrowing on the back of COVID, a furlough scheme. The government has done a lot, hasn't it? Is it all down to the government to be responsible for people who are going to food banks?
Yeah, of course it is. I think a lot of the COVID spending was ridiculous, and the government dug an absolutely massive hole for itself. But here we are. You draw the line at hungry children. That is the line. And teachers are telling politicians that they have children coming into school who haven't had breakfast, who are clearly hungry. That's a crisis. 3 million food parcels, emergency food parcels, handed out is a crisis. Sian's absolutely right about the issues that we've got with the welfare system and how kind of cruel and punishing it's become, rather than a lift up to get back into work or back into society, or to be able to just look after yourself if you can't do those things for whatever reasons. At the moment, the universal credit amount is, I think, £85 a week. I will believe that this is a fair system when a group of MPs, Conservative MPs, if there are any volunteers, accept £85 a week to live on, because I expect they spend £85 an evening in a bar, and it's simply not possible. In fact, isn't it the case that the
wouldn't
daily...
restrict that to just Tory MPs, I must say.
But hang on, hold the people making the decisions to account. That's what I'm saying. Isn't it the case that in the House of Lords there's a daily allowance for £200 to £300, up to £360 per day, and you've got people who are carers, single mums, parents who are trying to live on £85 a week? It's not possible. People are being set up to fail. And then people are wondering why we've got high crime rates, shoplifting, health problems. This is part of a whole system, a cycle of disadvantage where people are being set up to fail.
Silkie, what is the ask on the part of the government, though? Because governments also always have to make choices. There are multiple demands. I mean, whether it be defence, the NHS, I mean, there's a 7 million waiting list, all sorts of people going on strike. What would you do? What would your recommendation be? Shailesh is sitting, he's got a vote in Parliament. He's one of those Tory MPs. You want to live on 85 quid a day and try and do it. What is your message?
£85 a week?
£85 a week, sorry.
The message is, if you're going to do welfare reforms, start with making sure that kids aren't hungry, and make sure that people have enough to live on. There is a cost of living crisis. Middle class people are struggling. People up and down the country are struggling. But people who are on the poverty line and living in poverty in particular are struggling so much that they are now homeless and hungry. It's like a third world country. It's absolutely embarrassing.
I think Marcus Rashford, that whole free school meals thing that he dug in on and actually got his way with the government, actually, you could say, was down to a lot of this. Shailesh?
Well, could I just first of all say that I think it's rather sad that all Tories are branded as being rich. As somebody who came to this country at the age of 5 and couldn't speak a word of English and went to a primary school in inner city Birmingham and throughout has had his education in the state sector and the Redbrook University, and through sheer hard work got to where I am. I think perhaps we need to reappraise that there are poor people and not so poor people in all parties,
I didn't say you were rich. You're on 85 grand a year, and you're putting people in UC on £85 a week, but you're misrepresenting what I said.
Okay, Silkie, come back in a second.
Allow me the courtesy to have my say in the same way that I allowed you the courtesy.
Yeah, we'll come back.
I'm not interrupting you.
We can come back.
I mean, if you look at people like Peter Mandelson and their lifestyle, as well as others. But the issue is about food banks. I mean, first of all, can I just say a huge thank you and huge praise for members of the community, church groups and the like, who run the food banks and other areas where they give help to those who are needy. I have to be, we have to be realistic, and Charlie's touched on this. There have been tough times recently. The pandemic really caught, there's no A to Z book on a bookshelf that you pick up as to how to handle a global pandemic.
There's a huge amount of wastage, though, Shailesh. Come on, VIP lanes.
I mean, look, as I said, there was no A to Z
of course.
Of how to handle a global pandemic. But as far as the excessive expenditure is concerned, I take issue with Silkie on that as well. Furlough payments, there's a lot of people out there, millions of people who are grateful that they're able to keep their jobs. As far as grants to business is concerned, those people would have gone completely under. Lifetime's work building up family businesses, they would have been finished if it weren't for business helps. As the transport system was kept going and all of that. But as far as the food banks are concerned, there's been a massive impact because of the Ukraine-Russian war. Ukraine was the breadbasket of Europe. It supplied food for 600 million people in Europe.
Started before that's all gone. Come on.
No. But we had the pandemic before that. Mm-hmm. So the pandemic had...
Okay,
had
so
issues.
we haven't had any relief, is the point you're making.
We've had the Ukraine-Russian war. 600 million people relied on food from Ukraine. That's gone. We've had energy prices going up because of all the consequences of the war. Mm-hmm. So That being said, the government has, we've got the record level living wage that's increased. Universal credit, before the Tories came in, there was a disincentive. If you reached a certain amount of level to earn money, it simply wasn't worth going to work because it benefited. Universal credit had a tapered system, and I was a minister in DWP and helped take through some of the legislation. So it's a good system.
Okay, thank you, Shailesh. Silkie, quickly, then I'm going to bring back Siân. Go on.
Yeah, I don't think listeners who can hear for themselves will appreciate you misrepresenting what I said. Also, let me point out, I grew up on free school meals. I know the system very well. I know what it's like to grow up in a family where there is real anxiety about the cost of living and about making ends meet and about getting food on the table and things like that. This is too serious to misrepresent each other about. And it's also too serious when there are 3 million emergency food parcels being handed out for the government to introduce mass bank spying now for people in the welfare system. So now the government has said that all of the nation's bank accounts are going to be monitored, looking for people in receipt of welfare to see if they've got too much in a bank account, etc., etc. People are being treated as though they are criminals, and it's not fair. The whole system, people are being set up to fail and now being spied on.
Okay, we'll come back to that. We may come back to that. So, Siân?
I mean, as always, tax evasion, people not paying the taxes they should, far, far outweighs any kind of benefit fraud. And we do need massive reforms to the benefit system. At the moment, Labour are not saying they're going to remove even the 2-child limit on benefits. We've still got an awful system of sanctions. We've got disabled people feeling punished on a regular basis and being reassessed and having to go through all kinds of bureaucracy. There is an awful lot that can be done to improve the welfare system, but in the end it's fairer taxes, a more progressive tax system that will help to pay for this, and we're not afraid to